Honestly, Annie, all these labels for the generations, I find them really difficult to remember. So I have to go and look them up or every single time. So I printed them out today so we can just go through them. We've got baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. So that's my folks and your grandparents. Generation X, roughly 1965 to 1980. So that's me and your parents and all of my siblings. We've got the Millennials, 1981 to 1996. So I guess that's your sisters.
Yeah.
And then Generation Z or Generation Z, and that's you.
It's me.
And my sons. They're 1997 to 2012. And people might not know, but we now have a new one since 2012 coming up, and they're called the Alphas. So lots of different labels. Are they actually helpful?
And that's what we're going to discuss today. Welcome back to Too Young for This, Too Old for That, a podcast where two generations meet in conversation. I'm Annie Lewis, an actor just starting out.
And I'm Angie, I'm 53 and I am an osteopath and mum and all sorts of things. Welcome.
And before we start, we just want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Wilfred's, who are reinventing the spritz. You can shop them on Ocado and Amazon, and we'll be talking about them more later in this episode. So, Angie, I must admit, I didn't know what generation I was. I've thought I was an X this whole time. Where's like X, Z? Why am I a Z? Why are my parents an X? I don't really follow that. But all of these are really just labels, aren't they? I think what we need to discuss today is, are they actually identities?
Yep, and I think that's really interesting. And actually, I'm really surprised that you didn't know what you were, because I always get the impression that, you guys, sorry to point my finger as a label, the Gen Zs, you know that you're Gen Zs and you wear it with pride. So that's interesting, isn't it? Maybe these labels are labels that come from the outside more than the inside. Let's get into it. So, do you think that labels are helpful?
No. I think so off the top of my head, I would say the only one that I think is genuinely quite helpful is baby boomers, because I think that's very interesting, like post-war, that optimism, what it was like to, be that new generation after such horror. I think that's very interesting to discuss. But I don't know about, I think it's because I'm coming from a biased perspective as a Gen Z. You get a lot of stick. I said it. You get a lot of stick as a Gen Z. You get labelled as a snowflake, and it comes with a bit of it comes with a little bit of weight. Whereas I feel like millennials, you get A, it's a cooler name on a shallow note, but B, I think it's a lot more like, oh, it's okay, you're a millennial, you grew up in, you had the 90s and everything, but Gen Z, you come across as a smartphone, snowflakes, hypersensitive generation. That's what I feel, and I feel like it might only get worse with the Gen Alphas. What about you, Angie? How do you feel about the labels of your generations?
I've always found it a bit confusing, and I always have to look up which one I'm in. X. I suppose, I don't know, I've got a degree in economics as well somewhere in the background. It's useful to have these labels so we can understand the sort of prevailing times, and it's useful. And also I love politics, as you know, so I think it's also interesting that those sort of factors and features of the world, how they shape us. But I think the sort of pejorative bucket catch-all descriptions aren't helpful. So what you said when we were planning this episode, we do read, listeners, we do a very tiny bit of planning. It wasn't very long. You said, my generation, Angie's generation, what did you call us? Can you remember? You said out of touch versus snowflakes.
We were talking about the stereotypes, and the clichés would be that you have Gen X are, the out of touch generation, and Gen Z are the snowflakes, and millennials are kind of the happy in between. That's kind of, I think, the cliche. It's not necessarily what we agree with. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today is, are these cliches true? So what actually shapes a person? Is it our upbringing, our security, our culture? Or is it the time in which we are born? And does that all kind of play into one?
I think the truth is that it's everything, right? If you look at us as individuals, we're like an onion with lots of different layers. And, you can't shake the time you were born in, the prevailing conditions. You can't shake the home that you were born into and who your parents were and what their issues were. You can't shake the people that you met. Every layer of us as a self keeps adding on and forming who we are as our character. So I don't think you can take yourself necessarily. It would be quite hard work, wouldn't it, to take yourself out of that? And I guess there are people, aren't they, who dress up and live an Edwardian life.
Yeah, there are like you see people like completely buy into the 50s and live Goodwood every day or whatever.
Yes, but I think realistically it's probably a little bit difficult. But I think, and it's interesting when I see you and you're the same generation. Well, according to this, you're the same generational definition as my children. Actually, I see you as being quite different. And there's not that much distance age-wise between you. So I've got 17, nearly 18 and 21, and then you're 23. And yet there's a massive difference.
This is something we actually haven't really highlighted in the podcast. So Angie is the same Generation X as my parents, and I am Generation
Z.
I'm going to get this right. Z, like Angie's children. So we're and that's kind of the root of this podcast, is us coming together and discussing these things. I think, there is quite a big difference. I think an obvious thing is there's obviously, COVID played a part. And I think even though I'm only a few years older than your kids, like, one of them's actually finishing school in a somewhat normal way, whereas I finished school in the midst of a pandemic and all my friends had uni in their 18-year-old core years when you're meant to be going out and traveling, exploring the world. We were locked up, told not to hug. And I do think that plays a part. And I think that's something that actually we kind of all forget about when it comes to my little snowflake window. I almost feel like there's a micro segment in the Gen Zers of those who like turned 18 in COVID. I think a lot of us talk about that. It was really weird.
Yeah, so it was interesting this week. I read a report by the Edelman. They're called Edelman. They're a PR agency, and they're looking at different aspects of work and generational things. And they actually divided Gen Z. I don't know why I call it Gen Z, Generation Z, into Z 1.0 and 2.0, and so they actually had a split between them of sort of Gen Zs that were older and before the pandemic and Gen Zs that were younger before the pandemic, and actually describing different characteristics, different outlooks between one and the other. So that's really interesting. And let's put a placeholder here that we will definitely in the next season talk about COVID, because you mentioned a lot, interestingly, and for me, I don't think about it anymore other than from a health point of view that much, and it would be really interesting to explore that.
Well, I think without going too much into it now, I think because I turned 18 during COVID, and because I'm a teacher as well, I see the with young kids, I see the constant impact of it, whether it's like reading, like with different generations, I see how it impacted the younger kids, whether it's reading ages, their experience of school at the time. Some of the kids were even born during the pandemic. So it's really interesting. So we'll do a whole other episode on that. So going back to today, let's talk a little bit about technology and our relationship to it. So Gen Z is supposedly fluent in technology. Gen X kind of adapted through every shift. So Angie, how do you find your relationship to technology as a Gen X?
Gen X. Well, we've talked about the fact that we started off with a landline phone and a payphone. And now as I look at my table here, I've got my laptop and I've somehow managed to work out how to work mics, and I've got cables everywhere. I've got 2 laptops. I've got 2 mobile phones, one for the business, one for me. It has come along, but I suppose what I see is that we've had to adapt and we've had to learn and we've had to shift, but I've still kept some of those core ways of working and attitudes to the mobile phone, so or technology as a tool, and not as a sort of, I'm trying to not have it as a constant fixture. Whereas I suppose, I don't know about you, and I think you're maybe different to my kids or young people I think literally their phone is their companion 24 hours a What do you think? I mean, you were born, did you have an iPad when you were little?
No. So I always think that literally, I think my age group, I was born in 2002, was the last age group to have like, when we went to year 7, we had like Nokia bricks or chunky Blackberries. So yeah, we had phones, but they were literally just to like be safe.
Did you get the phone in year 6 at the end of primary?
No, I got it in like year 7, year 8. Yeah, just because I was going to big school.
That's quite late now.
Yeah, really late. We didn't really have iPad. I think having an iPad was still a bit of a controversial thing. If it was introduced into schools, we weren't quite sure if it was going to be a thing, and we still had textbooks. And Instagram again was just for photos, and like it was all a bit cringe. And I went back to my school recently. The phones there and iPhones, it's so intense and serious, and it's such a prevalent kind of issue that they have to have like pouches that lock away the phones. If you don't hand in your phone, it's an automatic detention, and it's a real like battle navigating how to keep phones away from the students during the day, which I completely agree with. I think keep the kids off their phones during the day. You're at school, have it anyway. But yeah, it's changed a lot. And I left school 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
So mega shift there.
So when you look at your, you've got nieces and nephews, haven't you?
Yeah.
Do they have iPads?
No, they this was a conversation. This was a conversation about, I think every new parent has, about whether to give a kid an iPad. They have like one of those kid tablets that if you have a plane, they only have it for like a plane journey or a long car ride. And to be honest, at that point, I say it's a blessing. Do whatever you need to do. But no, they're not iPad kids.
So those would be the generation, the alphas that have come after you in a way, who have really, really been brought up with technology, embedded in their world. Now, so technology is very different. We've had to adapt. You've never known a world without it in a way. And I think we've agreed over the time that, there's some liberating factors there and some overwhelming ones. I've got a question. Coming back to the snowflake label. I think my generation, and, so I'm in my 50s, and there are quite a few of my friends who have risen to the top, if you like. So they're sort of senior management now out there in the corporate world, and they're employing millennials. And the millennials always had a bit of a hard time as well. They were always, how they come into work and they don't want to work, and, they don't work. There's a question about their work ethic, and is it the same as ours? And then now that your Generation Z, are also being employed, I think there's been a snootiness from Gen X to these younger generations about work ethic. What do you think about that? Let's talk about it generally first, because I know what your work ethic is, and that's a different thing. But
yeah,
I suppose what we see is sometimes, and these are all tendencies rather than criticisms. So now I'm sounding like a parent. I don't want everyone to be upset. And it comes back actually to our very first conversation about passion v security.
Yeah.
Is that when we got a job, you just knew, for example, that you had to do it. Whether you liked it or not, you'd knuckle down. Yeah. Whether the boss was a bit of a dick or the boss wasn't, you'd go to the toilet, you'd have a cry, you'd put on your big girl pants, you'd get back to your desk. There wasn't so much of a, this doesn't suit me. You just had this understanding that as, the youngest person in the room, you had to just do it. Make tea, pick up coffees, pick up dry cleaning even, and make the coffee for the whole team. What would you say?
I've got what if they asked me to make the coffee for the whole team?
If I asked you as your boss.
I think genuinely, first off, it does have to depend what your work environment is and what you're walking into. Because if I walked into a corporate job that I had zero experience in as a grad, fair enough. But if I walked into something and it was like, I don't know, in the field like creative that I understand and I've now been working in for a little bit of time, I would be a bit like, I think it depends on the room you're walking into. Now, I've got a lot of opinions about Gen Zs and work ethic. Because let me try and formulate this in an articulate way. On one hand, very sympathetic to my generation because I think we're not given opportunities to network as easily. Like, yeah, we have LinkedIn and all that. But at the end of the day, we are told, like, work from home, talk on a Teams call, talk on a Zoom call, come into the office 1 or 2 days a week. So that whole opportunity to prove yourself is a little bit deprived. Like, how's everyone going to know? You know what I mean? However, I have quite a strong work ethic. I work really hard. And sometimes I do think my generation could be a bit lazy and like a little bit entitled. I do think that. I think we can be quite, I think we can. I have spoken to a few people, not in my close inner circle. My inner circle is very hardworking. I'm very, like, genuinely.
You're very proud of them.
I'm very proud of them. But there have been the odd person I've spoken to, and they're sometimes like, oh, you know, like I'm on this salary and I'm doing this X amount of hours, but the partner's on this. And I'm like, well, yeah, but the partner would have done those hours at some point. And that there is a rite of passage a little bit. And it tends to be people who are in corporate jobs who are maybe a little bit frustrated, like, why aren't I on that ladder immediately? Or things like that. And I think that sometimes my generation misses. But I wonder if that's because we're not in the office, not communicating, not networking, and you're not getting that. I don't know. But it is something, I do think there's a bit of entitlement.
Yes, I don't love that word, but yes, that word. Let's come back to it in a moment. Can I just say, listeners, that Annie has an amazing work ethic. I mean, I'm a workaholic, so that goes, I don't know if that goes without saying, but I'm a workaholic. Because I love what I do. Yeah, I genuinely love what I do. And I wasn't when I was bringing up my kids, and now they're older. So I feel like I've got now the time to really indulge myself in things that really fill me up, like working, helping people, doing the podcast. But Annie, who is 23, and who sometimes lives with her mum and dad and works really, really, really hard. And so everyone out there who, for example, even there's still that old trope of, oh, well, teachers get loads of holiday and they don't work. She's doing her notes and doing her class prep at night time and on the weekends. And I've been really genuinely think you're amazing. And I think also we probably wouldn't be friends if you didn't have that work ethic, because I'm probably really critical. So I'm glad you do, but you really do. And so that's really nice.
Oh, thanks, Angie. It makes me really emotional. It's really lovely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And then where but that word entitled, and, as a parent as well, it's really easy to throw that word out as a sort of, oh, you guys are so entitled. Sorry, boys, if you're listening. But I hear it a lot, with conversations with patients, with conversations with friends about similar age children. So children from, say, 16 to sort of 25 and maybe even a bit older, this sense of entitlement. How does that, do you think it's entitlement?
I know it's a really harsh word to use.
It feels a bit strong.
It is a bit strong, but it's not for I think my issue is it can come across, it's definitely some people. And I think it's because I think maybe part of it is life's really expensive now and it's really hard to buy a house. And I think there's maybe a lot of anger from my generation that, like, it's really hard to get on the property ladder and it's hard to live in London and it's tough. It is tough. So I can understand, I went for drinks with a mate and he's asked to be in the office 2 days a week. He's Irish and he's had to go and move into London into a rubbish flat and pay extortionate rent just to pop into the office twice a week and stuff like that. So yeah, like, that's frustrating and it's not entitled to feel like that. So I think maybe that's why there's a little bit of frustration. But I do think that, yeah.
I think that is entitled, though.
Do you?
You've got a job in the city. They need you to be in for 2 days a week. Where do you think you're going to be living? Portugal. It's not like that. You're not a digital. You can't. Not everyone can be a digital nomad, surely. Sorry, Annie's friend, whoever you are.
Oh, he won't. It's just someone I met briefly at drinks. He'll be fine. But
entitlement, the definition of entitlement, the fact of having a right to something, or the belief that one is inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment.
But I think maybe it goes back to a little bit of social media as well, just to tie it all round, because you see how everyone else is doing, you see what maybe these influencers are earning, or people who aren't working your crazy hours, and you're a bit like, well, why aren't I'm working till 9, why aren't I getting that? I think you can compare yourself a little bit more. You're exposed to it a bit more. I think would you have described anyone in your generation though as entitled? Is this just something like is this just a huge
No,
no?
I don't think I would have described anyone as entitled. Even some of the, I mean, there were some quite posh people. And I think, one thing we do need to acknowledge when we talk about this is that, you're from quite a wealthy family. I'm a self-made wealthy person, I suppose. Wealthy, not wealthy, but, doing okay, middle class person from an academic family. We are very, very fortunate in the strata of the country. So this conversation that we're having is obviously coloured by all of that. Yeah. So, and when I look at my children, they are very, very fortunate, whichever way you cut it. I don't think that, I genuinely don't think that anyone was entitled. I had a friend and her dad was a sort of shipping magnate, right? Magnate, not a magnet. He didn't attract ships in magnetic. And, and we hustled side by side. We got our jobs, we worked in the city, we kissed ass, we, took the sexism and the whatever and the long hours and we just worked. And no, I didn't, but, so I wasn't hanging out with Tim Nice but Dims who were, who maybe daddy gave them, I'm sure, and they're always people, right, whose daddies have given them a leg up in the city or in professions or whatever. So there are people that are entitled and, Boris Johnson's probably, not much older than me. And, someone like that would have been entitled. But I suppose I just saw that we didn't feel we were due anything. I suppose everyone in my circle, we're all self-made people. We just went out there and we built our own wealth. And I don't know whether then this conversation of entitlement comes just down to wealth, or does it actually come to some lived experience as well? I suppose what I hear from my peers is that they feel that their children feel entitled to hundreds of pounds of Christmas presents. If you're just on the material things, right? Hundreds of pounds of Christmas presents. You're paying out, everyone's paying out for driving lessons at the moment. So-and-so's mum bought them a car. That sort of thing. And it's not said with, so where's my car? But it's said with, they've got a car.
I mean, that's interesting. When I was talking about entitlement, I meant more in terms of like career. I think that the expectations in career has changed. I think it's also a tricky one for me to answer because the friends who I keep in my inner circle, the friends who I keep very close, are like the most ridiculously hardworking, impressive young people I know. Because I'm very much of the mantra that if I'm not the most impressive person in the room, I think I'm in the wrong room.
Say that again. If you're not the most,
so if I'm the smartest or most impressive person in the room,
yeah,
I think I'm in the wrong room.
Oh, so you want to be with smarter, more impressive people?
Yeah, and my friends, I think, are crazy impressive and hungry and hardworking people. So I'm just talking about the people that I've maybe met at like the odd social thing and stuff like that. When you're, and I'm a bit like, they're not people I tend to keep particularly like close. But I'm also mates with actors. And actors are freaking hungry, hardworking people.
The question I have is, do you know what I mean? It's not just entitlement about, can I have a new pair of AirPods or whatever, but entitlement of a sense that it comes back to what we talked about last week. I have a right to be happy all the time.
I think with Gen Z, I think it's more of actually, I think there might just be boiled down to there's a little bit of anger, maybe. I know we're going to do a whole other episode on it, but God's sake, like my micro generation is Gen Z, the 2002s or whatever, 18 in COVID, uni experience busted. You then go out into a corporate world that's totally a different landscape now. Zoom, Teams, navigating all of that, blah, blah, blah. And it is like, I was watching it on the news about someone saying, why would I let my kids live with me when they're adults? And one woman said, yeah, because it's really hard to buy a house, buy a car. It is quite a tricky field. So I know I was saying, some people feel entitled, blah, 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 blah. But I do get it because I do think it's tough. I've got mates who like commute into me. It's hard to. I think it's hard to financially make things stack today. So I think it's a little bit of frustration and anger. Sometimes it can tip into entitlement. But maybe can't we all, regardless of our generation, we're all a little bit sometimes a bit bothered about how the world is at the moment. You know, not all of us.
No, well, not all of us. So the question I had then is, coming on from that, how do you think your generation feels about the world today? Like the wider world?
I mean, it's tricky because I'm just one person. I can't be the voice of a generation. Generation X, how do you feel about the world today?
So again, I think, can we generalize about what the whole of Generation X feels like? I can tell you what I feel like. I'm pretty depressed about it, I'll be honest. I feel disappointed in my fellow humans and my generation that actually we should try as humans to make the world a better place and leave it in a better place than when we found it. And, if you look at the improvements that I saw in my life from 1970s, being a bit grey and there being 2 choices of crisps and, 2 choices of bread and, a bit of racism, like the 80s had more colour and more choice and more opportunity, right? And then the 90s, even more so, great music, and that's also a feature of how old you are in each of those times. But, life really changed. We travelled more, you could see the world. I was lucky I had a job, so I had money, so I could do those things. And now when I look at, and obviously that whole overconsumption has led to, and capitalism, I suppose, has led to where we are today. But I feel desperately sorry that we, maybe my generation, my parents' generation, we've let you all down. Why can't we eradicate hunger? Why can't we eradicate war? Not eradicate, but, at least have done a better job. And instead we've done a totally piss poor job, if you forgive me saying so, of making the world a better place. And I think maybe because we abdicated responsibility to politicians and we thought that they were doing a good job at managing things for the future, and yet, this has got a bit deep, and yet underneath, actually most people, it seems to me, are out for themselves, and that makes me really sad. That makes me really sad. In fact, nearly crying sad. As you know, I read a lot of politics, and I feel things strongly. So what about you? What do you think about the state of the world? Cheer us up, Anna.
I think, you know what? I hear everything you're saying. And I think that there's many amazing things about our world in that we've got social media, technology and things like that. We can connect with each other. We can connect with family and things like that and people like that who are halfway across the world. Brilliant. And that is amazing and special. And we have platforms now where we can do more. Yeah, the world's a tricky place. And like, this is where I was like, I know I said my generation's a bit entitled, rah, 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 rah. But I can also understand why we're a little bit entitled, why we're a little bit upset. Like, I think I know some mates who sit there and we go, didn't the 90s look grand? People used to connect more and not be on their phones and talk a bit more. And look, I know the grass may always be greener. But I also think that there's a lot going for the world at the moment, okay? We can do a lot of good in our world. We can take things like social media and technology and we can use it for good. And we can try and do a bit more out of it.
So talk to me about politics then. And do you think about politics and the world around, like how, the world around you, without getting into specifics, or even climate change? We could pick one of those. Because the reason for asking is that I have this discussion with the kids all the time, and I'm like, you guys need to be out there, get your placards. So I marched against Trump and all for Brexit and, blah, blah, blah. You can find me on a march quite often, right?
I've got quite a strong, I don't want to sound like a knob when I say this. I feel I have quite a strong humanitarian calling in life. Oh God, what a loser I sound. But I do. I wanted to talk about this story today because I was thinking about this when I had my morning coffee. When I was about 15, 16, I hope you don't mind me saying, I went to, and I loved I love my school. I recently went back there and did a speech. I really am one of those annoying people who have a lot of school pride. However, when I was about 15, 16, my school was a very strong charitable link to the Congo. And I remember they would build fundraising, like an extortionate amount of money for something else to be built in the school. And we had this like lovely priest come in and be like, can you please bring in £2 so we can send it to the Congo at the same time? Me being 15, 16 and absolutely livid by this, I went home and I cried and I wrote a letter to the head mistress of the school. And I wrote something, oh my gosh, I wrote something along the lines of, because I don't want to just like disclose where I went and stuff like that, blah, 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 blah. I wrote something along the lines of, I do not understand why the children in Africa and the Congo are sitting on desks and are sitting on the floor while we're fundraising for this. And it was really like, oh my goodness. And then I got called in for a meeting with the headmistress and she said to me something along the lines of, and she's a really impressive lady, so I don't hold it against her at all. Oh, Annie, when I was your age, I remember I was campaigning against nuclear weapons. And it was something along kind of like the tone of, you'll grow out of this. I never really have. I recently went back to the school and someone said to me, oh, Annie, you still trying to be an actor and save the world? And I think we can all play a part in doing something good for people, okay? I think if you have a strong calling to help someone, and I think particularly, I'm just going to say, if you've come from a grand education and you are and you've benefited from that, look, it's not, you can use that and give back and help other people. Use it. You don't choose where you go to school, but if you feel you've benefited from a fantastic education, harness that and use it and give back. And I'm on kind of like a little bit of a mission at the moment which I'm happy to speak about on the podcast of like, I'm working with a charity and I want to bring in more creative and arts-based programs to children that don't necessarily have access to it. Basically, my long-wielding tangent is, if you have the ability or you feel that you can, whatever generation, whether you're generation boomer, X, Z, or even if you're a little baby alpha in school, don't feel it's a phase and you need to grow out of it. Think, how can you harness that and make the world a better place, regardless of whether you're 80 or whether you're 8? And I think that is a cliche that we should just, it's not even a cliche, but we should just, if we can spread that message, that you can just do a little bit of good, think, what can I do good in the world? Then do it. That was a waffle and an awful tangent. But that's basically that was my little story I wanted to share on the pod today.
And thank you for saying that. And can I pull out a couple of things? So one, you said we're looking a bit embarrassed at saying that. So I think put that all aside because what you said was really great. Number two, you said I have a strong humanitarian streak, and now I'm a bit embarrassed. Why, why be embarrassed? When you listen back to this, I know that you will really feel that it's a heartfelt moment, and it shows shows everyone what a good heart and a big heart you've got. And actually that is really reassuring to me that there are people out there, young people out there, and I know there are, but to have one in my orbit is amazing, or in the same orbiting system as me, that their opportunities to carry on making the world a better place, despite I have a tendency sometimes to feel glass half empty. You might be surprised, but that the world is going to hell in a handcart, and I wouldn't blame you all for just lying down and smoking weed or for the rest of your lives and just saying, well, sod this, we're all going to go and lie on the beach in Bali. So thank you. And so I find that really good. And it reminds me also of a story when I was about 14 or 15 and I was really passionate. I wanted to join Friends of the Earth, but I didn't have enough money to sign up from my pocket money, or maybe I had signed up. And I was talking to my granddad, so my mum's dad, and I said, we've all got to join, greenhouse gases. We've all got to, stop greenhouse gases. I'm going to join Friends of the Earth. And he just said, don't be silly. It's just a phase. It's just a phase you're going through. And there's been so much technological progress in my life. So he would have been before the boomers, right? Whatever that generation was. He said, there's been so much technological innovation. They'll invent a machine to get rid of the greenhouse gases, or they'll make a factory to make ozone. So it was so, again, that sort of generational divide of being condescending in some ways. And also, maybe it's just that each generation is a bit there's a bit of selfishness, there's a bit of condescension. That's not a word.
I know exactly what you meant, though.
And also though, a ceding of control to someone else. Someone will invent a factory,
Yeah.
and I don't know. So yeah, all to the activism.
Or like the whole, I'll be dead by then.
This whole sort of, and maybe that's just humanity.
Well, like, I suppose for listeners, you can't see us, but like when Angie was talking about how she views the world right now, if you don't mind me saying, it was, it was really emotional. And it was, if I was in person,
I nearly had to cry.
Like if I was in person with Angie, I would have just given Angie a big hug. So I think, to be honest, this sort of episode, we might have to do a part 2 on, because there's a lot we want to talk about, I feel. And it's the kind of the foundation of what our podcast is about. But I think, talking about generations and bridging those similarities and differences and breaking the stereotypes.
So I've got a question.
Go on.
Yeah, breaking the stereotypes. Question about actors. So it would strike me that Generation Z actor is probably the most snowflakey person that anyone could invent.
Oh, I completely disagree.
Like, are you just spending all day flouncing out that someone's called you by the wrong pronoun or, said something a little bit risque or whatever?
No, I think Gen Z actors have it hard. I think the acting industry is a beast. And I think anyone who's trying to make it as an actor who's a Gen Z, or point blank any actor at all, I think they've got hustle about them and I respect it. I don't think they're flouncy. I think actors can come across as flouncy. And that's kind of sometimes when I tell people I'm an actor, I cringe. I do, because I know all the cliches. Here we go. But God, no, they've got grit to them, my actor mates. Fair play, they're grafters.
I've got another question, sort of related, sort of not. Back in Gen X, so my generation, this is a sort of tangent, but at work, and we'll maybe need to do sexism as a topic in the future. But there was a lot of sexism, right? And being a young, fairly attractive woman, honestly, if I told you some of the stories, we'll have to do it over a glass of wine, but your hair would literally curl.
Angie has told me one of them, and shocking. Yeah.
Let's not do that today. But do you feel that you are more alive to it? Are you more sensitive to it?
What, sexism?
Is it still there? Yeah.
Yes.
As a woman.
Yes. Particularly in the acting industry. Oh gosh, we have to do a whole different episode on this, but we had Me Too, rightly so, a fantastic movement I feel deeply strongly about, but I feel like everyone went, that's just happened, grand, we don't need to worry anymore. And that's tosh. And it's also just, I think it's not as, I think actually it's not the case you're more alive to it, it's just a reality. And I think, in my workplace, like I don't experience any of it in the schools I teach in. I can't speak for other teachers, but personally, in schools it's all grand. But it's in the acting industry, it's definitely not gone. I've got stories, Angie, as well that we can discuss.
Oh, yeah, well, we'll have to do sexism. And do you think your generation, or maybe you, would call it out more quickly? Because I know that my generation, we just sort of sucked some of it up.
We 100% have the tools.
Got on with it.
We have the tools to call it out more quickly. We have the support. I'm also a very lucky actor, and I have the coolest agent ever who would bat for me any day if I needed her to. But I have experienced it in the past where you just kind of go, that's happened, I'm just going to swallow it. And you just, because you don't want to, because the acting industry is so tough, and I imagine a bit like the corporate world, like you were in, you don't want to. I actually had someone once say to me, you don't want to make a fuss.
Yeah.
Don't want to be a problem.
That's how we grew up, right? Don't make a fuss. Suck it up.
Yeah. All right. So, Angie, we've busted a few stereotypes today, but I think we do need to just touch on our big stereotype of this, is that a cliche of Gen X, Angie, would be that you're out of touch. I would never say you're out of touch. I think you're very, you're very liberal. You're very in tune. You're very and you're on it. And I know you say, and I know you sometimes get a bit nervous in social media. You're great on socials. So to me, and you're someone who's living life to the full. To me, you are not a cliche Gen X.
So not the cliche of being cynical and jaded then.
I don't think so. I think well, it's tricky because obviously what we've spoken about in this episode, but I think you are also someone who's incredibly open-minded and open, and you're doing a podcast with a 23-year-old. I don't think you can be a completely cynical, jaded person and do that.
Well, I agree. Okay, and Gen Z, I suppose the stereotypes would be being precious and easily offended. Precious, fragile and easily offended.
Me?
Yeah, well, so yeah, I don't think you are. I don't think you are. I think what's interesting, having gotten to know you and also having these conversations with someone who is the same age as my kids, but not my kids. And also you're sort of probably Gen Z 1.0, right? And there may be 2.0. Is this, precious, fragile, easily offended, seeing the world through your eyes, and us talking last week, for example, about mental health, I think sometimes my generation, we see that openness to talking about mental health as being a weakness. And actually, I don't think it is. I think maybe it's gone a bit too far as these things sort of meander around the equilibrium. So it's maybe gone a bit too far, but I think that openness is probably in the long run a better thing, but we just need to all meet in the middle. So we need to be less jaded, less in my generation, less jaded, less cynical, and your generation need to rein in some of that little fragility is the wrong word, but fragility maybe, and be less easily offended, and we meet in the middle. So
Yeah. But that's the root of what this podcast is about, like taking a little bit from each generation and learning from each other and absorbing it a bit from each other. What can we take from each? What's similar? What's different?
Yeah. And I think, if I was to give everybody at home an action from today, and this is Angie the back care boss speaking, it would be go and find someone in your world that's a different generation to you. And it doesn't matter if you look up or you look down, but who can you find that you don't know that well, and maybe just go out for a coffee with them. I absolutely love that Guardian feature that, talking across the divide or something, where you get someone from a different lifestyle. Go and meet someone, because genuinely, Annie and I, we find this has been really interesting for me. It's like a therapy, but without paying for it.
And I'm definitely unqualified. But
good therapy is just where you talk, right? And you find your own answers. So I think that's probably us.
Go find a different generation mate, guys.
So Annie, what's your too young for this, too old for that moment this week?
So mine's to do with teaching my little kids, and at the moment the kids wherever I teach are obsessed with my relationship status. They are obsessed to know whether Miss Annie is married, 23, or whether I'm in a relationship. And their horror and gasps across the room when they find out I'm 23 and not married. And it's made me feel too old, too young at the same time, because
Spinster Annie.
I know.
Yeah,
and it's just
you're over the hill, girl. Over the hill.
I know. Someone get me a butter churner. Angie, like in Little House on the Prairie.
Angie, I used to love that. Mine, actually doing this podcast and being with you, it makes me feel young, but it really sometimes makes me feel quite old. I've got loads of stories and loads of life experience, and then you think, gosh, that time has gone. So yeah, sometimes it does make me feel old. That's okay as well.
Angie, I need to give you a hug.
I know, we've done 2 episodes now where we've not been together. It's not working.
I miss our together sessions.
So Annie, to sum up then, I feel as though the scripts have probably changed since the baby boomers and Gen X, in that, they were old and we were young. And actually nowadays we have the freedom to mix it all up a bit. And, for me, I feel it really important, as well as having gravitas and seriousness and professionalism and a good work ethic, to also be childlike and playful. Because if you can't do that, then you're missing out on a whole sort of big element of life. What do you think?
I think, particularly in your generation and as a woman, it's very important to be multifaceted. I think it is very easy to be stereotyped into, okay, well, you've reached this point in your life, particularly in a woman in a career, you must stay in this lane, this is your character, this is your arc now. Whereas actually, we're all multifaceted humans, and there's a duality of being a woman. You can be playful, you can be serious, you can have a corporate job, run a clinic, and you can also be a 360-degree human with joy and life and have friends. And I think that actually, if we're moving towards that, with all generations, that you don't just have to be stereotyped into a box, we're opening up so many more doors for people in every generation.
Yeah, so stay open, curious, keep learning, despite all the burdens of life and all the things that go on, and keep talking, right?
Keep talking.
This is the time to say thank you to our fabulous sponsor, Wilfred's. They're a non-alcoholic spritz, and they're changing the landscape of cocktails and mocktails. Brilliant for all generations. We know that the younger generations are drinking less alcohol, so fab to see these great products coming out that we can use instead of drinking. So Wilfred's, check them out. Ocado on their website and on their Instagram.
So everyone, thank you so much for listening to our Generation Gaps and Other Myths episode. I think this is possibly going to need a part 2. I think there's a lot to unpack on this. So if anyone has any ideas on things they want us to discuss about the various generations, please contact us on Instagram, email, our speak pipe on our website. We're on TikTok as well. Drop us a comment.
Great. And actually something's just come to mind. So I still am going to find it probably quite difficult to remember who everybody is. But I went to see fabulous Ben Elton early this year. I don't know if you know who Ben Elton is. He was a very famous comic and author. Very famous. You need to go and read and listen to him. And he did this fabulous skit. I saw him twice because I loved the show so much. And he said the way to tell who is through their tattoos. And I'm sorry, Ben, if you're listening, I'm probably going to get this wrong. But he said Generation X, they have like Celtic tattoos and like an armband, right? The Millennials, they have big chunky tattoos and sleeves, like full sleeves, like with the dark bands. And Generation Z, they have little tattoos, and he said like a little drunken spider's been dipped in ink.
Yeah, like my mates
walking all over them from their fingertips to their necks. Little butterflies here,
they're like sketches.
Little dolphins there, little different things. Whereas the Millennials would have like a proper dolphin or a proper flower. So so that's it. It's all in the tattoo. So for those old generations like me, if you need to know who's who, look at the tattoos. Celtic crosses, that's us, Gen X. Millennials, full sleeve, chunky colours, that's them. And Generation Z are the drunken spider tattoos. See you next time.
It's so accurate.